Hello and welcome back to Zenin Fanfics. Today we're starting an exciting new series, What If Deku Had a Rabbit Quirk? If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more content. The story we are featuring is written by Galactic Unicorn 43 on archiveofourown.org. You can find all the relevant links in the description, so be sure to check out the author's profile and say hello. Now, let's dive into the story. He doesn't remember much of what it was like before. One moment everything was dull and blank, barely any thoughts passing through his mind, and the next everything was too much, he couldn't think. It was like his mind expanded, able to understand and have more complex thoughts and ideas than he had been able to before. I think this one was a success, a woman cheered. This confirms our theory between genetic mutations and quirk compatibility. Yeah, the theory shows merit. Now can we please finish up so we can head home? A man grumbled, sounding annoyed. He was confused. What did they mean by success? Quirk compatibility? He felt like he needed to move, but he didn't have any energy left to so much as squirm. Thankfully, for the time being, he was left alone. He didn't know how long that would last though. He took this chance to look around. He was laying down on a metal table in the middle of a white room with lots of weird-looking items all around the place. There were also 4 people around him. The woman he heard first was walking around, seemingly putting the items away, talking about medical devices always being a pain to put away. She had red skin and purple hair. Looking to his left, he saw who he believed was the annoyed man. He had brown hair, green eyes, and tan skin. One of the last 2 was sitting in a chair making click-clacking sounds while in front of a glowing box. He wondered what it was for. This person didn't look like a male or female as they seemed to resemble a tree. How were they moving? Did they have complete control over each branch or, stop it? He told himself. Stay on track. Right, so the last person looked important. She had the same clothes as the others, a long white robe thing, blue stretchy gloves, gray fitted pants, and white shoes. However, she had an air of authority to her. Her blonde hair pinned up and back, looking over the whole room with disdain in her void-like eyes, not a lick of color present in them. She was also holding a clipboard, writing on it quickly but looking up occasionally. Her eyes landed on him. She grinned. Teeth on display and danger in her eyes. Fear shook his body. Never before had he felt such terror flow through him. All he could think was, get away, run, run, run. Just as he was about to listen to his instincts and run as far away as possible, someone picked him up, sliding their hand under his small body. That action surprised him. His mind was screaming at him, saying he was too small, meant to be bigger, and yet being this small felt normal to him, like he had always been this size. It was a feeling of both wrong and right, happening at the same time. Looks like the little bunny wanted to try and make a break for it. How cute! Don't worry, little bunny, we're done for today. The purple-haired woman soothed, starting to run her hand over his back. She somehow sounded both condescending and comforting. We should probably put it back in its cage before it tries to run again. The annoyed man commented. He sounded so bored with what was going on. Good idea. Come on, bunny, let's get you back to your cage. The purple-haired woman cheerfully exclaimed. He didn't want to go back to the cage. It always made him feel trapped and scared. Nothing like it felt to be out in the open like this, even if he was being held. Unfortunately, he didn't get to make that choice. She put him back in his cage and left him alone. It's been a while now since the purple-haired woman had put him in his cage. The tree-looking person had come by a few times to fill up his water and food, but that's about all the interaction he's had since he woke up surrounded by those people. He thinks there might have been a couple other rabbits in the cage with him in the past. He could smell a few different scents that aren't his after all, but now there's only him. The scent's now dull and barely there. At least his cage has some things in it and isn't bare. On the side with the door he has a food and water dish, both to the left of said door, and on the opposite side of those he has a spinning wheel for him to run on. However, the entire right side of the cage has a burrow for him to hide in. A whole entire side. With a burrow just for him. That's been his favorite place to hide in. It's the easiest way for him to stay out of sight of the scientists. That's what he learned the people he woke up to were called, by the way. There's been a few times where when the tree person came in to fill up his food and water, They had someone else's scent on them. There were also some deep grooves in their bark reminiscent of claw marks. The scent reminded him of a predator, but there was also fear in their scent, like they were going through the same thing as him. He hopes that one day he can meet them, maybe then he won't feel so alone. Seems as though that day came sooner than he thought. The very next day both the purple-haired and void-eyed woman came to his cage. The purple-haired one vibrating in excitement and the void-eyed one looking at him with curiosity in her eyes. It set him on edge, his ears standing up straight and his fur puffing out, his instincts warning him to be careful, wary. "Hello again, little bunny. We're taking you to meet someone. Hopefully it doesn't eat you," Purple Hair declared, murmuring that last comment under her breath. He started to tremble in fear. She knew he had heightened hearing and yet she still whispered under her breath. He thinks she wanted him to hear, her eyes alight with glee and excitement. He ran to hide in his burrow, hoping that it would offer some protection. "Stop toying with the rabbit, we don't want it to faint on us." Void Eye scolded, staring the other woman in the eyes. Purple Hair turned away, looking sheepish. "Sorry boss. It won't happen again." "Good. Now let's introduce these two subjects and get this part over with. Grab the rabbit." Void Eye commanded. Purple Hair nodded rapidly and went over to his cage, following Void Eye's command. He didn't want to be picked up and brought to wherever this someone was. He tried to go deeper into his burrow but she was still able to grab him and pick him up. He squirmed and kicked, trying to make her let him go, but it was all in vain as her hold didn't allow him any leverage. Purple Hair started walking and started up a conversation with Void Eye. He couldn't hear what they were saying, the only thing on his mind was his fear. He didn't know if he'd survive this encounter and that scared him. Then he started to smelt it, the mystery scent that was on the tree person. The further they went from the room with his cage in it, the stronger the scent grew. Soon enough he started to see claw marks along the walls. They seemed to be caused by desperation rather than aggression. He didn't know if that was relieving or frightening because he knew that a desperate animal can be more dangerous than an aggressive one. He wasn't ready to meet this predator, but once again, he didn't get to make that choice. They stopped in front of a door saturated with the predator's scent. It practically screamed fear and danger. Purple Hair said something he didn't catch before opening the door and tossing him in. Luckily he was able to land on his feet instead of his back. That would have been very bad. Now he's able to at least kick or run if it comes down to a fight. Taking a quick look around he saw a bigger food and water dish, about the same size as him, as well as a section full of soft, fluffy blankets pushed into a bowl shape. That was all he saw before a voice spoke. "You better have a good reason for being in my territory, prey." The words were spoken in a growl, a threat underlying the words. He turned towards the voice and saw a wolf. They had blonde fur, long enough to keep them warm but not enough to overheat, and ruby-red eyes filled with malice. He could smell the lingering fear on them, but right then all he could think about was the scent of predator and his own fear. "I'm so sorry. They just threw me in here. I swear I didn't come here by choice. Please don't eat me." He stuttered, trying to appease the wolf and hopefully not get eaten. "I don't plan on eating you and I doubt you'd taste good either. And since I can smell the red beach's scent on you, I guess you're telling the truth on not being here by choice." The wolf huffed out, laying back down on his paws and looking straight at him. He breathed a sigh of relief. Thank Cammy he wasn't going to be eaten. He was kind of offended that the wolf thought he wouldn't taste good, but if that's what's keeping him alive he'll take it. "Oh, thank you. But, what happens now? I don't know when the scientists will bring me back to my cage, so I can't leave your territory yet. Think the red beach said something about you staying for the night if I didn't kill you immediately, right before throwing you into my den. And you got a name, or am I just gonna have to call you Fluff Butt?" The wolf questioned. "Do not call me Fluff Butt. Give me a sec to think." He had to think carefully. This would likely be what the wolf called him for a very long time. Looking down he saw his paws, his green paws. He got an idea. "I got it. Call me Midori. And is there something I can call you, Mr. Wolf? Call me that again and I'm biting your head off, but also, you can call me Bakugou. Because one day I'll beat those beach butt scientists." The wolf, no, Bakugou declared to him. Midori knew that this would be the start of a wonderful friendship. Midori was 4 when his life was turned upside down, but he was also 4 when he met Bakugou, his first and best friend in the whole world. Project Q equals I, Quirks equals Intelligence Branch, NGM, Natural Genetic Mutation Subject Name, M604-21G Species, Japanese Hair/Nisagi Mutation, Pelt Color, Green, Eye Color, Green Quirk, Points to Skills. This artificial quirk allows its user to gain points from completing tasks. These points can then be used to unlock new skills or upgrade previous ones. Types of skills: unknown, limits, unknown, drawbacks, unknown. It's been a long time since Midori met Bakugou. He thinks they met around 6 years ago. During that time he found out what had happened to them. They were given quirks, really powerful ones. Ones that made it necessary for them to be on constant watch. After meeting each other, both him and Bakugou started being trained to use their quirks. Every day for multiple hours a day, it was exhausting. Midori had also learned something else. He learned that after receiving the quirks, both him and Bakugou started aging slower. Well, that's not quite right. They started aging at the speed humans aged. Midori's unsure if that was intentional or if that was just a side effect of the quirk transfer. Either way, both him and Bakugou have gotten stronger over the years. Their quirk was called Points to Skill, and it allowed them to gather points from doing things like eating and running. Those points could then be used to upgrade or gain new skills. Their skills were displayed as a skill tree on a screen that they could make visible or invisible if they so choose. Midori was aware of the fact that the reason he had to show his skill tree when using the points he had gathered was to make sure he didn't choose a skill that could help him and Bakugou escape. Bakugou had to do the same as well. Most of their skills were chosen for them by the scientists, but every so often he and Bakugou were allowed to pick their own skills. Midori treasured the skills he got to pick out for himself. Maybe one day they will be strong enough to escape this place and be free to live as who they want to be. Maybe one day they will be able to be human instead of mindless animals. Midori is bored. Like super duper, out of this world, mind-numbingly bored. Maybe he could try jumping to the top of the room? But he's already done that 20 times already. What if Midori, if you do something stupid and get stuck again, I'm not helping you. But Bakugou, I'm so bored. Bakugou did not look impressed with him. Looking him dead in the eyes with a look that said, "Really?" Midori pouted, hopping his way over to where Bakugou was laying down with his head resting on his paws. "Well, mister, don't do anything stupid. What are your great ideas?" Midori questioned. Bakugou smirked, or the closest thing to a smirk a wolf could get. "Why don't you try using telepathy on the scientists? That should keep your tiny brain occupied." Bakugou teased. "Oh, that sounded like a good idea. Maybe he could learn something. Hey, I do not have a tiny brain." Midori was slightly offended by that comment, even if it was kinda true. Bakugou just rolled his eyes, seeming to not dignify him with a response. He leaned forward and picked Midori up by the scruff, setting him down next to himself so he could curl around him and put his tail over top of him. "I'm gonna take a nap. Let me know if you learned something interesting," Bakugou requested, then proceeded to curl up and shut his eyes. Midori huffed but settled down, getting comfortable in the mass of fur, and activated his telepathy. That was a skill both him and Bakugou got to choose for themselves. The scientists didn't believe that it was dangerous for them to have, so they were both allowed to unlock it and upgrade it a few times. They spoke to each other through telepathy a lot in order to get practice with it, as that was their primary source for learning about new things. Listening to the thoughts of scientists was a very educational activity. Midori stretched his mind and started listening in. It took a lot of practice for him to recognize each scientist's thought patterns, but he got there eventually. That practice, however, was what allowed him to notice that there was a new thought pattern near the edge of his telepathy. "Bakugou, I can hear someone new. They're at the edge of my telepathy. I think you should listen in as well," Midori advised. It wasn't often that someone new came, so this new presence should be looked into. He felt Bakugou shift to cover him a bit more before he felt the push at his mind. He knew that meant Bakugou had activated his own telepathy. They both then started to listen into the new person's thoughts, hoping they weren't a new scientist. That wouldn't bode well for them. Stupid hero commission. I could have been taking a nap with Hizashi and the cats, but instead I'm here on this raid where I probably won't even be needed. Right? What do they mean by that? Finally, time to figure out why this place was kept hidden. Midori was confused about what that meant and was about to say something to Bakugou when, boom, an explosion went off, one strong enough to shake the whole facility. Midori was scared, he didn't know what to do. Bakugou knew what to do though. He stood up quickly, picked Midori up, then headed over to the corner farthest from the door. Bakugou then proceeded to put Midori down on the ground and push him under his legs, standing above him, protecting him. You stay under me and don't move. If someone tries to get close, be prepared to run. We don't know if the people who made that explosion are friendly. Bakugou ordered. Midori could hear the fear and resolve in his voice. He knew that if it came down to it, Bakugou would kill to protect him. A few minutes of standing in anticipation and fear later, they heard it. The sound of footsteps getting closer. The door handle shook. Hey! This door is locked. A voice shouted. This was bad. Midori trembled where he stood under Bakugou. A few minutes later they heard more footsteps run down the hall and stop in front of the door. Midori knew there was talking going on behind it, but he only heard the BLD pounding in his ears. The door opened. Shouta was annoyed. The hero commission called him a couple hours ago to go on this raid during one of his few days off. He could have been at home taking a nap with Hizashi and the cats, but instead he's here on a raid he might not even be needed for. At the very least this raid shouldn't take more than hours to complete. Hopefully. Things only started to go off the rail close to the end of the raid. Shouta had been looking around a laboratory of sorts when he heard the call for assistance come through the comm link. Quiet Cloud here, we've got a locked door down the south hallway. If anyone can come and get the door open, that'd be appreciated. Quiet Cloud asked. The woman was one of the few limelighters that Shouta didn't mind working with, as she had a no-nonsense attitude like himself. This is Eraserhead, I'll start making my way over there to help you with the door, Quiet Cloud. Shouta replied. He knew how to pick locks quickly after all. After getting confirmation that Quiet Cloud got his message, he started making his way over to the south hallway. Pretty soon he started noticing the claw marks along the walls that got more and more frequent the closer to the door he got. He found Quiet Cloud and another pro standing in front of the door. Shouta didn't waste any time with small talk and immediately got to work on picking the lock. After a couple seconds he heard the telltale click of the door unlocking. He opened the door and froze. There in the corner farthest from the door was a wolf and a rabbit. The wolf was standing over the rabbit, almost like they were trying to protect them. Growl as soon as the door opened. The wolf shifted to cover more of the rabbit and growled threateningly, pulling up their lip to show off the sharp teeth beneath. It was very obvious what they were being told. Don't you dare come any closer. Sit down on the ground and don't make any sudden movements. We don't know if they are dangerous or not. Shouta commanded the other pros. He didn't know why these creatures were here, but they were, and it was their job to get them out. Thankfully the other pros listened to his command and sat down on the ground, keeping their hands in eyesight of the creatures. Shouta decided to try and talk to the creatures. Maybe he could calm them down enough to get them out and checked over by a vet. Midori was confused. These new people didn't look like scientists. Heck, two of them were covered in such bright colors that he started getting a headache, and they were putting in a lot of effort to try and appear non-threatening. He decided to ask through their telepathy instead of out loud. That way he didn't draw even more attention to himself. Midori could understand that. If he was the one with sharp teeth, he would also try and protect Bakugou. We don't mean either of you any harm. Will you let us help you both get out of this building? Midori looked at the man who spoke. He had long black hair and tired black eyes. He wore a black jumpsuit with combat boots and had what looked like a white scarf around his neck. His eyes held so much kindness in them. Midori could tell the man wasn't a threat to them. He didn't set off his instincts like all the scientists did. They all made him feel like he was nothing more than an interesting toy, one that could be thrown away at a moment's notice. But this man was different. He didn't set off his instincts at all. In fact, he felt almost drawn to him, his instincts telling him that he's safe in the man's presence. Midori did just as he said, hopping out from under Bakugou and making his way over to where the kind man was sitting. He felt the eyes of both Bakugou and the kind man following him, the other people having looked away, avoiding eye contact with Bakugou. When he got to the kind man, he hopped into his lap and sat down. The man looked down at him and smiled. His kind eyes showed surprise, but also relief and joy. "Thank you for trusting me. I'll make sure you and your friend are safe and far away from this place," the man said, running his hand down Midori's back. Midori knew the man would keep his word. He trusted him. Even if that was mostly due to his instincts repeating it over and over again in his head. He got the feeling that maybe this was their chance to finally be free. Shouta had been surprised when the rabbit hopped over and into his lap. Not upset, just surprised. He thought that it would take longer to get them to trust him. Now that he was apparently deemed safe by the rabbit, the wolf seemed less on guard with him. He should probably start leading them out of here now. "Thank you for trusting me. I'll make sure you and your friend are safe and far away from this place," Shouta said, running his hand over the rabbit's back. He decided to let them know of his gratitude before he told them his next steps. "Would you let me guide you to the exit?" The creatures looked at each other, seeming to have a silent conversation, before the wolf started walking over. Now Shouta wasn't afraid of animals, but seeing the previously aggressive wolf start walking towards him did raise his heart rate a little. The rabbit hopped out of his lap and headed back over to the wolf. The next few seconds would show just how smart the two animals were. The wolf sat down on the ground and the rabbit proceeded to hop onto the back of the predator. The wolf then stood up with the rabbit on their back and confidently walked over to him. No sign of concern for the rabbit on their back, as if they had done this often enough that the wolf knew the rabbit wouldn't fall. Shouta and the other pros behind him stood up slowly. They didn't want to be seen as a threat by the animals. Shouta should probably either give them names or see if they respond to anything. Maybe ask for names if he could find a way to do that. "Alright, come on you two." Shouta turned slightly to keep both animals in his line of sight while also starting to walk away. This is Eraserhead. The locked door had a wolf and rabbit inside. Both seem to be intelligent on some level and don't seem to have any injuries, but if someone could get ready to look at them both, that would be appreciated. Shouta informed the others on the raid through his comm link. He figured that just bringing out random animals might freak some people out. The wolf, he'll call them Honshu for now, fell into step right next to Shouta. Both Honshu as well the rabbit, who will have the temporary name of Nusaji, were twitchy and flinching at every sound. Their eyes continuously flicked over the other pros near him, not letting their guard down. However, they seemed to be fine walking next to him, more steady and calm. Hopefully it will stay that way and they won't start attacking people when they get to the front entrance. The amount of people waiting outside will likely be more than they have ever met at once. When Honshu started speeding up, probably to get out sooner, Shouta turned their slow walk into a slow jog, moving through the white and gray walls faster. He didn't want them to get more stressed from the already stressful situation. Leaving the building would prove to be complicated. As soon as they got a few feet from the front entrance, Honshu stopped walking. Both them and Nusaji stared out the door at the clear sky. Their eyes wide and mouths slightly ajar, awe twinkling in their eyes. Shouta looked at them in confusion. He didn't know what was making them look at the sky with so much wonder. Honshu eventually walked toward and out the doorway, but their steps were slower than before. Their head moving side to side, taking in everything around them, Nusaji doing the same. He slowed down again and started slowly walking over to a part of the street that was less crowded while also sending Quiet Cloud to go and see if there was a medic that could be spared to try and look at the creatures. The other pros also broke away from the group, likely to finish their debriefs and return to their agencies. "Alright you both, I'm gonna wait here with you until a medic can come check you out. The only thing they will be doing is checking for any obvious injuries, as the likelihood that any of the medics here know how to do a thorough health check on animals is very low." Shouta informed both Honshu and Nusaji, hoping to prevent any panic at seeing a medical device. He then proceeded to sit down along part of the sidewalk away from most of the commotion. Both creatures seemed to nod their heads as Honshu sat down as well. After a few minutes of waiting, a medic came over to check on them. Unfortunately, that was also when Shouta was called to give a debrief of what went down from his perspective. He let the medic know that while they were both skittish, neither Honshu nor Nusaji seemed to be interested in attacking anyone. Shouta then turned and left, quickly walking over to the police to give his debrief, hoping it wouldn't take too long for him to get back to the creatures. On his way back over to the sidewalk where Nusaji and Honshu were still waiting, the medic pulled him aside. They were close enough for the animals to see both of them but far enough that they couldn't hear them. Is something wrong with the wolf or rabbit? The medic shook her head. Not anything that I could find, however I did learn that they both are male. There is something you should be aware of though. After you walked away, both of them started to get anxious. The rabbit hid more in the wolf's fur and the wolf started to make low growls in warning. It was only when they saw you making your way back over here that they started to calm down. I think it might be best if you were the one to get them situated, whether that be at a wildlife conservation or somewhere else. Shouta was only slightly surprised. He had a feeling that they would latch onto him. After giving a quiet sigh, he responded, I might just take them home with me until they feel safe enough being away from me, then see about finding a place for them to live permanently. He will need to call Hizashi to make sure it's fine though, hopefully he'll agree. After the medic nodded her head, he made his way over to the sidewalk where the creatures were still sitting. Waiting for him, it seemed, as both of them got up and made their way over to him when he got close enough. I heard you both got anxious when I left. He stated calmly, crouching down to be eye level with them. He didn't want to frighten them. Honshu looked away from him, like he was embarrassed, while Nusaji looked at him unashamed, if slightly nervous about his reaction. Shouta nodded his head and sat all the way down in front of both boys. That's all right. I just need to call my husband to see if he's fine with me bringing you both home. Once he was situated and stopped moving, Nusaji hopped back into his lap while Honshu sat beside him. He should probably ask them how they felt about those names, that way if they don't like it he can find something else to call them before Nusaji and Honshu stick. Once the boys got settled, he took out his phone and pulled up Hizashi's contact, and after making extra sure the speaker was pointed away from all their ears, he pressed the call button. Ring ring, Shouta. Are you alright? Are you injured? Why are you Shouta cut off the loud rapid-fire questions by flatly saying, I'm fine Zashi, now stop yelling into my ear. Once Hizashi had sufficiently calmed down, i.e. stopped demanding answers, Shouta began the process of explaining the situation to him. You should clear out the extra bedroom, we're gonna have some guests with us for a while. After the man, who had introduced himself as Shouta, called his husband, Hizashi, and got the okay to bring them over, he started guiding both Midori and Bakugou over to a weird-looking box. The box had 4 circles at each corner that looked like they could spin, many small windows all around it, and had the smell of gas. The weird box also apparently had doors, as Shouta opened one of them and revealed seats that were stuck to the bottom of the box. Do you need help getting up, or do you want to try jumping in yourselves? Shouta questioned, his eyebrows raised and eyes soft, trying to let them know without words that either answer was all right. Midori looked up at the space right in front of the seats inside the box and back down at the ground, noticing that the gap from ground to the box's floor was larger than him. He would not be able to jump high enough to reach. Bakugou, however, had no problem jumping the gap as he immediately hopped right into the box and sat down on the seats. Hey, not even going to ask if I need help getting up, Jarrett? He cried indignantly, fur fluffing up in his offense, and eyes slightly narrowing at Bakugou. Briefly he saw how Shouta's gaze became sharper, paying closer attention to their interactions, however he ignored it. He knew without a doubt that Shouta wouldn't hurt either of them. There's no reason to hide the fact that they can communicate with each other from him. Bakugou looked down at him from the seats and slowly, staring him directly in the eyes, said, No. I don't want to. Complete and utter betrayal. Midori looked up at Bakugou and proceeded to pout. After a few more seconds of sulking, Midori hopped toward the box, sat down in front of the gap, turned his head towards Shouta, and made a loud, pitiful whining sound. Looking at Shouta with wide, pleading eyes. Sighing, with a touch of fondness leaking through, Shouta picked Midori up and put him next to Bakugou on the seats. Leaving behind his offense at being left on the ground, Midori snuggled right up into Bakugou's fur, letting out pleased little chatters. Shouta then closed the door and got into the seat with a smaller wheel in front of it. Alright, you two, try not to move around too much. While I'm semi-good at driving, my car is a bit old so it might JRK every so often. If you two aren't sitting down when that happens, you could slide off the seat, so keep that in mind when you move around. We will get to my house in about 15 minutes. With that said and done, Shouta did something, and the newly dubbed car started rumbling. Both Midori and Bakugou squeaked when they were pushed back against the seats from the car moving forward. With wide eyes they looked at each other, then sat up quickly to take a look out the window. That leads them to now, the scenery passing by in blurs of green, gray, blue, and sometimes other colors. Midori couldn't stop himself from gazing out the window, wide eyes taking everything in. The trees, the buildings, even the people walking down the street. Excitement bubbled inside him. He's never seen this much color before, not even during the scientists' colorblind tests. They said both him and Bakugou could see all the colors humans did alongside ones they couldn't see, like ultraviolet. Getting back on topic, Midori had been looking out the window, admiring the wide range of colors, when his gaze was drawn to a display of numbers next to Shouta. Every so often the numbers would increase, but they never decreased. He figured counting them wouldn't hurt, maybe it would even help him learn what the numbers meant. When they got to the house he realized that the numbers went up 15 times. He then remembered that Shouta said it would take about 15 minutes to get to the house. Guess that means the number counter was a clock. Then, Bakugou hadn't been as interested in the scenery, choosing instead to take a nap on the ride to the house. When Shouta drove into a driveway and parked the car in front of a red, one-story house, Midori figured that meant they were now home. Due to the fact that Bakugou would never hurt him, Midori took it upon himself to wake the wolf from his slumber. He did this by nibbling on his ear, of course. Why the F are you biting my ear, Midori? Bakugou screamed the moment he woke up. Oh, calm down, I was just nibbling on them. No need to get so mad, and it woke you up. Bakugou just continued grumbling, but what's done is done. He heard a snort come from the front seat. Midori looked at Shouta with an innocent gaze, tilting his head just a bit to the left. Shouta only raised an eyebrow at him. Are you really trying to act innocent even though we both know I saw the whole thing? He asked dryly, amusement shining in his eyes. Midori yipped at Shouta, his own eyes sparkling with mischief. Shouta shook his head, sighing playfully. Midori then went to paw at the door. He wanted to see his new home and finally meet Hizashi. He ended up putting his paws up on a latch of some sort, which resulted in the latch releasing and opening the door. Right as he was about to fall out of the car and meet his untimely demise, Bakugou snatched him up in his jaws and pulled him back. Midori just continued to stare blankly at the open door. That's what that latch does. He noted blankly. Bakugou put him down and then snapped, You think? During their exchange, Shouta quickly got out of his seat and rushed around the door to them. He gently but swiftly picked Midori up and spun him around, looking at him from all angles for any sign of injury. Are you hurt at all? Cammy, I should have warned you both about the inside handles before something like this happened. He all but demanded. Midori just shook his head. Bakugou had caught him before he could fall and get hurt. Shouta sighed in relief. Good, that's good. Now, let's get you both inside before something else happens that could injure either of you. Midori thought that meant Shouta would put him down, but apparently not. He just changed the way he was holding him to be more secure and comfortable before moving out of the way for Bakugou to jump down and follow him. Midori couldn't stop his squirming. He was just so excited. They would be meeting Shouta's husband soon, and they would finally have a safe place to live. Shouta had to hold onto him tighter just to make sure he didn't drop him. Bakugou seemed to be calmly walking next to Shouta, however Midori could read him better than anyone else. He knew he was just as excited as him about this new home, but was just staying alert of any signs of danger so he could protect them both if needed. Once they got to the door, Shouta had to rummage around in his pocket for a sec to find the key. When he did find it though, he wasted no time opening the door and walking through it. He then, once Bakugou had also walked through, closed it behind him and finally put him down on the ground. Midori looked around in awe. The front entry was an open space with a little cubby for shoes on the right that also housed house slippers. Looking further into the house, Midori could also see that it was very open in design. To the left there was a TV up against the wall with a couch placed in front of it. There was also a coffee table in front of the couch. Sitting in front of the short sides of the coffee table were 2 lounge chairs. On the right was just a closet door. Behind the living room was the dining room and a kitchen. There was a 4-person dining table with 4 chairs to the right of a wall. The wall had a portion missing, allowing the person to see right through it. However, Midori was only tall enough to see the ceiling and some cupboards from his low to the ground angle. There was also a hallway on the left which likely led to the bathrooms and bedrooms. "Zashi! I'm home!" Shouta yelled into the house. Thump! A muffled curse followed the loud noise before rapid footsteps came down the hall. "Shouta!" A man burst out from the hallway and Shouta just barely managed to stop him in time to prevent the loud man from deafening him and Bakugou. "Quiet down, Zashi, both boys have sensitive hearing. It's much easier to make them go deaf than it is for a human," Shouta admonished. He was correct though. Just that second of enhanced yelling made Midori's ears ring, and judging by the way Bakugou was shaking his head, he also had ringing ears. "Oops, sorry little listeners," Hizashi replied in a much quieter voice. "You know, Sho, I honestly wasn't expecting the first animals you brought home to be a rabbit and wolf. I thought for sure it would be a cat." Yeah, cats are my favorite animal. Doesn't change the fact I brought home a rabbit and wolf. Now boys, this is Hizashi, my husband. Zashi, this is Nusaji and Honshu. Oh, are you both alright with those names? I forgot to ask earlier." Midori looked at Bakugou. While the name was a bit on the nose, he was fine with being called Nusaji for now. Once they both trusted Shouta and Hizashi more, they would have a conversation about using telepathy to talk with them. But until then, Nusaji will work. They both looked at Shouta and nodded their heads in acceptance. He smiled at them. "I'm glad you're all right with them. Now that introductions are finished, Zashi, do you want to do the house tour? I need a nap." "Sure thing, Sho. Come on, Nusaji, Honshu. Let me give you the grand tour." The tour was very helpful for Midori and Bakugou. They were able to learn that down the hallway were 3 rooms. The bathroom, which was the first door on the left, the guest bedroom, the second door on the left, and the MSTR bedroom, which was the only door on the right. The MSTR bedroom also had a bathroom, but Hizashi and Shouta wanted that one to be kept mostly for themselves. During the time it took them to get to the house, Hizashi set up both the guest bedroom and the bathroom for them. Apparently, when Shouta first started telling Hizashi about them, he immediately got to work on setting up the rooms. And since there was 30 minutes between the beginning of the call and them getting to the house, Hizashi was able to get a bit set up. The bathroom had only a few changes. A small box with some type of sand had been put beside the toilet. Hizashi explained that they intended to adopt a cat, so had already gotten a few necessities, like the litter box and a cat bed, but now that they had Midori and Bakugou to take care of, getting a cat would be kept on the back burner till the both of them felt more comfortable. At least that's what Hizashi said. He also put hair ties over the cabinet handles to prevent him and Bakugou from opening it, saying that some of the items inside it were toxic and that they shouldn't mess with them. Hizashi also covered the ground with a fluffy rug to give their paws more grip when walking in there, to keep their paws from going cold, and so that if they wanted to hide in the bathroom they could curl up on a fluffy surface instead of cold and hard tiles. Other than those changes, the bathroom was left mostly the same. The most obvious changes were in the bedroom. That's what Hizashi told them, so they'll take his word on it considering they never saw the room before it was changed. The bed was in the rightmost corner and was covered in a bunch of blankets and pillows. Most of the blankets being blues, blacks, and some pink ones as well. The pillows all had monochrome colors, with either mostly black with swirls of gray or mostly gray with black swirls. It looked like they were arranged to try and look like a nest of sorts. Beside the bed was a brown side table with a small lamp and clock on it, with a small drawer underneath the tabletop. There was also a small cat bed placed between the desk and side table, as well as a food and water bowl which were right next to the cat bed, underneath the tabletop, that were a very vibrant red. The desk was a brownish red color and was bare of anything besides another lamp on it, while the spinny chair in front of it looked like black leather. The very obvious changes, however, was that most of the empty space was taken up by chairs. Chairs that were placed in a circle with blankets stretching over top of their backs and pillows holding down the blankets, making the best den he and Bakugou could ever imagine. I wasn't entirely sure if having a den would help you both feel more comfortable, but I figured that it couldn't hurt to put one up. Midori had just been gazing around the room with eyes wide in shock when Hizashi said that. When he turned around, he saw Hizashi rubbing his hand behind his head, looking sheepish. Now that won't do. Neither he nor Bakugou liked that Hizashi was being all shy about giving them such a wonderful gift. So they both went up to Hizashi and rubbed against his legs, just to drive home how much they appreciated it. Midori himself made little chitter-purrs that he hoped showed his gratitude, shoving his face into Hizashi's shin, while Bakugou let out a few chuffs and rubbed his head against Hizashi's thigh. Don't feel bad. We love it. Thank you, Hizashi. Midori shouted. Even though he knew Hizashi couldn't hear him, he still wanted to say it. Thanks you both. Hizashi reached down to pat him on the head, which he very much nuzzled into thank you very much. Bakugou, however, shied away from the pets, jumping out of range, giving a soft grr in warning. Do you not like pets, Honshu? Bakugou nodded his head. The scientists had always been a bit more touchy with Bakugou than they had been with him. Hizashi got into a kneeling position so he could look Bakugou in the eyes before declaring, I promise I won't hurt you, if that's what you're worried about. If not being touched makes you more comfortable, then I'll try to avoid any unnecessary contact. Does that sound good? Both him and Bakugou looked at Hizashi with wide eyes. No one besides Shouta has been that considerate with them. Bakugou nodded his head again, though this time much slower. I'm glad. Hizashi admitted, his eyes full of joy and gratefulness. He then stood back up, regaining his loud excitement. All right, now let's get back to our tour. Next stop, the garage. Him and Bakugou eagerly followed behind Hizashi as he walked out the bedroom door. They couldn't wait to see the rest of the house. The rest of that day had been filled with Hizashi finishing the tour. He ended it by showing them the garage, him and Shouta's bedroom and bathroom, more of the kitchen and dining room, as well as the few storage closets. Midori noticed that the house had a very calming feel to it, decorated with lots of soft colors and things like pictures and plants, keeping the house full but not cluttering it. It made the house feel more like a home than just a place to live in. He thinks that he wouldn't mind living in a place like this, alongside his brother, of course, for the rest of his life. Putting aside that revelation, after the tour both him and Bakugou had started slowing down, it had been a very long day for them. Shouta, noticing this, got some food from the fridge for them to eat for dinner, then let them go to their room to head to bed, saying that they would go out shopping for them both tomorrow and to get lots of sleep. That had all been almost a week ago. The shopping trip had entailed lots of distractions, food and toy shopping, and even some collars and leashes if they wanted to go out. Now though, they were meeting someone Shouta and Hizashi wanted to introduce them to. They had wanted them to get settled in before the introduction, hence the week-long wait. Apparently he was their boss, and after being told about him and Bakugou, Hizashi and Shouta had to call him to get time off work after all, he insisted on having a meeting with them. Hopefully this meeting will go well. As they waited for Nizu, Shouta and Hizashi's boss, to arrive, Shouta and Hizashi gave a brief overview of him so that they wouldn't be too surprised when he got to the house. First thing you should know about Nizu is that he isn't human. He's never actually told anyone what he is, but most believe that he's a bear or a rat of some kind. Honshu, please don't attack him, that could get all of us in trouble. If you feel the need, please let us know or remove yourself from the situation. You both still following? Shouta info dumped on them. In all honesty, Midori had lost the man at Nizu isn't human and couldn't get back on track. The only thought running through his mind at the moment was, huh? Bakugou, however, seemed to have only been off track for a bit because after a second he did eventually nod. He tilted his head. Why would they think Bakugou would attack Nizu? Midori scrunched his nose and face. F you too. Midori ignored him. Bakugou had given him the information he missed, and now he wanted Shouta, or Hizashi, he wasn't picky, to explain how in the world a prey animal became the boss to humans. Could he do that one day? Looking back at Shouta and Hizashi, he made a gesture that he hoped said, go on. Hizashi chuckled. Seems his message was received loud and clear and was also somehow amusing. Well, continuing off of what Sho said, Nizu is one of the few animals that has a quirk. His is called high specs, and it basically makes him smarter than most humans that don't have intelligence quirks of their own. Hizashi smiled at them. He is very interested in meeting you both, as he believes that you both might also have a form of intelligence booster as well. Or something along those lines. He didn't say a whole lot when we called him. He also is pretty confident in his ability to speak with you both and understand what you say. Now that was surprising. Another animal with a quirk. How rare is that exactly? Also, would he really be able to understand them both? He's not sure if those questions are ones he wants answered or not. Now, the rat should be here Shouta was interrupted by a knock at the door. How in the world does the rat get his timing perfect every time? Shouta questioned dryly, but he still got up to open the door. You are a sneaky rat, and I feel like I should stop being surprised at that fact. Shouta said right as he opened the door. Now Shouta, what brought this on? I am always punctual, and I knocked on the door at exactly 1 p.m. The creature named Nizu replied, trotting in from behind Shouta. He was a short creature, about 1/3 Shouda's height. He had beady black eyes, one of them even had a scar going through it, as well as white bare-looking ears. His white fur was well cared for, as all of it was very smooth-looking and uniform. The gray turtleneck shirt and form-fitting leggings, with a belt as well, gave the impression of strength and power, even if his red running shoes didn't match the rest of the outfit. However, Midori didn't take any of this in. As soon as the door opened and the creature's scent hit his nose, he froze. He recognized that scent. 5 years earlier, it had been a very tiring day for Midori. The scientists had been poking and prodding at him all day without giving him any sort of break. He was now being carried back to his and Bakugou's den by Purple Hair, who kept stroking his head and ears over and over again, calling him Bunny every time. It made his stomach roll. She may have been the one to first call him that, but now all of them called him that. It was only ever Little Bunny, or Baby Bunny, never Rabbit. They've started calling him that cursed name during their small tests. It felt more like torture to him. Safe to say, he no longer reacted well to being called that. Right before he drowned in his thoughts, he caught a scent, a fearful scent. It hung in the air, demanding the attention of all who could smell it. Faintly, Midori could pick out hints of lemongrass and mint. What confused him, however, was that the scent smelled like both predator and prey, which doesn't make any sense. Lifting his head, he turned to face where he thought the scent was coming from. An open storage room with a wire cage sitting atop a chair drew his gaze. Purple Hair must have felt his head turn cause she looked down at him, then at the open door. Oh, you looking at that cage? Well, that cage used to house another specimen. They weren't exactly like you and Puppy, but they were close. I'm surprised there's any of its scent left for you to pick up on. After all, she looked down at him and he met her gaze, seeing the mania hidden within her eyes. It was transferred to a different facility a long time ago. It was the first success. Oh, how I miss subject S999-01W. When Midori had gotten back to his and Bakugou's den, he had told him about S999-01W, but Bakugou had never caught their scent. He had only ever been told about what it smelled like. It was no wonder Bakugou didn't recognize the scent. He could only stare, uncomprehendingly, at Nizu S999-01W. His eyes were as wide as the moon itself, and his mind a blank sheet of paper. The only thing he could think to say was, S999-01W? Bakugou turned to look at him with wide eyes and his jaw dropped, probably remembering the time when he had told him about learning that there were more like them, that subject S999-01W was like them. Nizu was who he focused on though. He had frozen the moment Midori said that name. His ears were pinned to his head, his tail was pulled between his legs, and his eyes became slitted and sharp. Nizu looked at him and all his fur puffed up in alarm. Those pitch-black eyes, nothing like the dark emptiness of the Void-Eye woman, held so much fear and hostility within them. How do you know that name? Nizu growled at him, eyes narrowed. Well, I'm screwed. Midori thought to himself, meeting Nizu's gaze. Hopefully he will be able to fix this mistake before he becomes the creature's lunch. It had been a long time since anyone has called Nizu that. He thought that all those who knew it were dead and gone, that the name S999-01W only existed within his nightmares. But this tiny rabbit, bunny is such a demeaning word, somehow knows that name. He knew it was bad manners to growl at his staff's charge, especially when they were just recently rescued. Wait a minute, rescued? Nizu looked more carefully at the rabbit before him. He took in the rabbit's posture, one of both fear and assuredness. The wolf beside the rabbit had gotten into a defensive position over them once he started growling, moving to be able to easily protect the smaller creature. Nizu decided that in order to figure this situation out, he needed to calm himself down, preferably before he ruined all the progress Aizawa and Yamada had made with the creatures. My apologies for growling, that was not fair of me. However, I would still like to know how you came to learn of that name and how you knew it referred to myself, if you would be willing to tell me. Nizu inquired, hoping his apology would quell any resentment he may have caused. The rabbit shook their head. No, I should have been more respectful when I asked. I didn't consider that the name might not be something you'd be happy with. And to answer your question, I know of that name because one of the scientists at the facility told me. I had caught a bit of your scent from an old cage and she saw me looking at it before explaining that you hadn't been at that facility for a while and that you were called. The rabbit shifted a bit, moving from side to side on their paws from under the now sitting wolf before their face twisted in disgust. That name. So I knew the name because I was told, and I knew it was your old name because I recognized your scent. Does that answer your question? The rabbit tilted their head to the side. Nizu nodded his head. Yes, that answers my questions. Thank you for telling me. I apologize again for growling at you. I now understand the situation we have found ourselves in. Moving on from that disheartening conversation, as you know, my name is Nizu. May I know your names and pronouns? The rabbit's eyes started to glimmer and they started to bounce slightly. Sure. I gave myself the name Midori, although since we couldn't very well tell that to Shouta and Hizashi, they call me Nusaji. Also, I don't know what pronouns are exactly, but if you're asking about my gender, I'm a guy. The rabbit Midori answered. Name's Baku, but the humans call me Honshu. I'm a guy as well, by the way. Also, you better not try to hurt Midori or I will attack you myself. Baku threatened, narrowing his eyes at Nizu. Duly noted. He replied back, smiling slightly at the obvious care and protective longing Baku had for Midori. Also, which name do you prefer I call you by, as I am able to tell Aizawa and Yamada of the names you chose for yourselves? Hold on one to see, what do you mean by, name you prefer? Is there another name we don't know of? Yamada cut in. Considering both him and Aizawa could only hear one side of the conversation, Nizu could see why they were both confused. Of course. Due to the fact that these two have known each other for so long, they decided to name themselves. They told me both the names they chose for themselves and the names you chose for them, and I was just now asking which they preferred. Nizu explained to his confused staff. He then looked at both boys. Now you both have yet to answer my question. Which name do you prefer us to call you by? I like being called Midori. It's just what I've always liked best, and it's the name Baku calls me. Midori exclaimed. He even raised his paw before speaking, to make sure he had Nizu's attention. Just call me Baku. I'm more used to that name and will react to it faster than Honshu. Didn't look Nizu in the eyes when responding to his question. Instead, he looked down and at Midori, who was still peacefully sitting below the large wolf. Perfect. Thank you for answering my question, you both. Nizu replied, a small smile appearing along his maw. He then turned to address the humans in the room. Aizawa and Yamada, they would like to go by the names they chose for themselves, which are Midori, who you called Nusaji, and Baku, who you called Honshu. Aizawa and Yamada nodded their heads in agreement. We can do that. Thank you for trusting us with your names Midori, Baku. Aizawa said, looking both boys in the eyes. Midori grinned a bunny grin and Baku huffed slightly while looking away, though his wagging tail gave him away. Nizu could tell that staying in the Yamazawa's care would help them grow into the best versions of themselves. There was one last thing Nizu had to ask them both though, before there was no one that could speak with both them and the humans present. During the brief pause in conversation, They had all moved to be actually in the living room. Nizu took one of the love seats at the ends of the coffee table while the Yamazawa couple took the couch. Midori and Bakugou chose to sit on the couch as well, but they sat as far from the humans as they could. Bakugou had chosen to lay down on the couch while Midori got himself settled on top of his back, burrowing into and cuddling up in the long fur. They both looked comfortable and satisfied being near each other, so Nizu figured their aversion to being near the couple was just habit and not anything else. There is one last topic I wish to speak with you two about before I must return to my duties. Nizu said to the other animals, turning to face them and give them both his full attention. Both Midori and Bakugou looked at him, heads tilting to the side just a bit. Would you both be willing to share what your quirks are and what they do? Midori and Bakugou looked at each other. He could see a range of emotions within Bakugou's eyes, and he knew without a doubt that those emotions were reflected within his own eyes. Midori asked Bakugou with telepathy, looking him straight in the eyes. This was a conversation that should only involve them. Bakugou suggested and grumbled. His last sentence, while reluctantly said, was proof of his growing trust in the humans. Bakugou sent the feeling of a mental head nod over to Midori with telepathy. This way Bakugou didn't need to give a verbal agreement and they didn't give away their ability to talk to each other through telepathy. Would it be possible for you to tell us what your quirks are first? And we want to know why you want to know our quirks. Midori both asked and demanded of Nizu, steely eyes locked onto the creatures. Of course. How silly of me to not say that beforehand. My quirk is called High Specs. It grants me intelligence higher than most humans, apart from those who have intelligence quirks of their own, of course. This has allowed me to live around humans despite being an animal. And as for why we want to know your quirks, I will say my reason is mostly curiosity. If that makes you uncomfortable, I completely understand, and I am willing to leave if you wish to tell Aizawa and Yamada only. Nizu cheerfully responded. Midori nodded his head, but didn't comment. He wanted to know what Shouta and Hizashi would say. He could tell that Bakugou also came to a similar decision as he also didn't respond. Him and Bakugou both looked at their current caretakers, waiting for their responses. I'll go next. My quirk is called Voice. It allows me to amplify my voice to very high decibels, or simply put, make my voice really, really loud. Although it has caused me to go deaf from all the loud sounds right next to my ears. Hizashi chuckled, sheepishly rubbing his hand behind his head. I do wear hearing aids though, so you don't need to worry. There isn't much else about my quirk, but as for why I want to know your quirks, it's pretty simple. I want to be able to take care of you both better. I want to know if there are any specific requirements for you both to be healthy that stem from your quirk, or if you need anything else that we have yet to get you, like say more blankets or toys. All in all, I just want to be able to take care of you both as best as I can and in whatever way you boys need it, quirk-specific needs included. Hizashi finished speaking, his eyes practically glowing with his affection and his smile radiating warmth. Midori felt that if he could cry, he would 100% be doing so right now. He wasn't expecting his answer to be so nice and good, though he probably should have. Hizashi was the one who spent time and effort making a good den for them, even though he didn't have to, just because he wanted them to feel more comfortable. Midori shakily said to Bakugou. Bakugou also sounded choked up by the sheer kindness Hizashi showed them. Putting aside their emotions for now, they turned to Shouta. He seemed to know they were ready for his answers as the moment they looked at him, he started to speak. My quirk is erasure. I can erase a person's ability to use their quirk so long as I'm looking at them. But once I blink, the effect stops and I have to reactivate my quirk. I get severe dry eye from it as well as headaches, which is why I always carry eye drops on me and like taking naps. As for why I want to know what your quirks are, I want to be aware of if they are a danger to yourselves or others and help you train them if either are true. As well possibly help you train them anyway if that is something you wish for me to do. Other than that, it's the same as Zashi's reason, to be able to care for you both better. Not much else to say on that front. Shouta shrugged at that last comment, but everything he said was sincere. His voice may have been flat and dry, but it was steady the whole time. No hint of a lie or trick anywhere, just his honest care. While his quirk is a bit concerning to Midori, the fact that not once has he used his quirk on either of them shows just how much he cares for them both. Midori said to Bakugou, his inner voice all wobbly. Bakugou looked him right in the eyes as he asked his question. With their decision made, Bakugou and Midori looked back at Nizu. He was still patiently waiting for their answer. Shouta and Hizashi were waiting as well. We won't tell you everything about our quirk, but we will tell you the basics. We want to keep most of it to ourselves just in case. Bakugou confidently proclaimed. Midori didn't protest and let him do it, knowing that if he didn't say this part then he wasn't going to have time to say anything else. Bakugou knew how much he loved to ramble about their shared quirk. Very well, any information you are willing to share with us will be appreciated. Aizawa, Yamada, they have decided to share with us the basics of their quirks but have chosen to refrain from sharing anything specific as a precautionary measure. Nizu translated for Shouta and Hizashi, turning to face them. Once he finished translating, he returned his gaze to him and Bakugou. Please tell us what you are willing to share. Midori straightened up from his position in Bakugou's fur. Now it was his turn to speak. First off, you should know that both me and Bakugou have the same quirk, as well as that we are pretty confident it is artificial and was not naturally created. With that out of the way, our quirk is called Points to Skills. Just to clarify, we have the same quirk but we don't share a quirk. The quirk allows us to gain points from certain actions that we can then use to either unlock a new skill or upgrade the quality of a previously unlocked skill. It does not hurt us, nor will it hurt someone on accident. It also doesn't have any other requirements or needs that you need to worry about. We will also not be telling you the skills we have already unlocked nor the skills we could unlock, but I will let you know now that each skill could be considered its own quirk. While neither of us feel comfortable sharing our skills at the moment, we may share them in the future. Are there any questions you have that aren't on specifics? With his part completed, Midori resettled within Bakugou's fur as they both waited for Nizu to finish translating to Shouta and Hizashi and to see if any of them had any questions. During the couple minutes of silent thought, he and Bakugou patiently waited while playing a small mental version of I Spy with each other. Sure, they could use their telepathy to figure out what the others are thinking, but that was both rude and served them no purpose, as if they had a question they would ask them up front. I don't have any questions. Do you, Nizu-san? None that I can think of at the moment. Shouta gruffly replied. Nizu shook his head in reply before looking back at him and Bakugou. I believe that is everything that we needed to talk about while I was here. I must go back to my duties now, but it was wonderful to meet you both, Midori, Bakugou. I hope to see you both again soon. Until then, I will take my leave. Nizu stood up from the love seat, bowed in farewell, and headed out the door. Gone as suddenly as he arrived. Well, now that we've got that all settled out, let me go start on dinner. Hizashi stood up from the couch and went right into the kitchen. The clanging of pots and pans echoing out from the doorway. Come on, you two, let's go see if he needs help with anything. Shouta stood up as well, but didn't start walking away until they were both following him. Yeah, Midori could get used to this kind of life. Maybe, a couple days, weeks, months down the line he'll be ready to share everything about his quirk, but today, he's just going to eat dinner with his family and revel in the warmth and love that surrounds him. It's been a couple months now since he and Bakugou moved in with Shouta and Hizashi. Apparently, since they are married, their combined family name is Yamazawa, which is the name they use when something involves the both of them. Midori doesn't have a full grasp on all that yet, but he's determined to understand it one day. Over those few months, Nizu has come by a couple times a week to teach them both some of the common knowledge they had yet to learn due to their years-long isolation. Since Nizu was once in their position, he took up teaching them as he had a general idea of what knowledge they had likely learned or didn't learn. The mini-classes have been a great help to at least Midori, and he thinks Bakugou also appreciated the information, even if he didn't like to show it. Shouta and Hizashi stayed true to their word, and only used the information Midori gave on their quirks to help care for them better. Not once had either of them tried to learn about their skills or pushed for more information. They both seemed content to let him and Bakugou share at their own pace, which just made Midori want to cry out of sheer gratefulness and joy. Today, though, would be different. Him and Bakugou had many long and detailed conversations, talking about all the pros and cons, and finally came to the decision that Shouta and Hizashi had gained their trust. So much so, in fact, that they were ready to tell them more about their quirk. Now, all they had to do was to set their plan into motion. It's been a few months since Shouta brought Midori and Bakugou home with him, and he feels like they've finally settled in. Movie nights now end up with Midori in one of their laps and Bakugou sitting next to one of them instead of them sitting on the ground away from him and Hizashi like they did at first. If that isn't a sign of growing trust, Shouta didn't know what was. Though that could be attributed to his groggy, sleep-deprived mind. The night before he had patrol from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., so 8 straight hours of jumping from rooftop to rooftop and fighting back alley criminals. It is currently 7 a.m. in the morning, meaning Shouta got a total of 2.5 hours of sleep once he got home, seeing as it took half an hour to get to his house once patrol ended. He is not going to do anything that requires higher brain function until he has had at least 3 cups of coffee. As his coffee brews, Shouta looks out into the living room, spotting Hizashi lounging on the couch. The laptop in front of him has the logo for his "Put Your Hands Up" radio station, letting him know that Hizashi was currently planning for his next segment on the station. The click-clacks of his fingers on the keyboard made a pleasant background noise. It blended with the whirring of the coffee maker as Shouta leaned against the counter, waiting for his coffee to finish brewing. Then he heard a different click-clacking sound, the kind that comes from claws instead of nails. He turned his head toward the hallway just in time to see both boys come sprinting out of their room and into the living room. Midori seemed to be chasing Bakugou, though Shouta couldn't quite figure out why. He knew they weren't mad at each other. This wasn't a fight, just another one of their impromptu games. They were darting around the couch and coffee table, narrowly avoiding slipping on the hardwood floor. There was so much joy in their eyes, but Shouta has gotten to know them well enough by now to spot the mischief tucked just beneath the surface. Maybe he should go join Hizashi in the living room, just to make sure neither boy planned on breaking something. Walking into the living room, he saw that Hizashi had picked up his legs to avoid them being either stepped on or ran into by the zooming creatures. It made him smirk a little. Then Bakugou, in an attempt to get away from Midori, hopped onto the couch, settling so close to Hizashi that his body was practically in his husband's lap. Hizashi's eyes went wide and looked up, meeting Shouta's own shocked gaze. Midori had always been the one to get this close, curling up in their laps without hesitation. But now, Bakugou was the one sitting in someone's lap and neither human knew what to do. He's dash. I can see Zashi. Shouta can see the exact moment Hizashi's eyes light up in joy as he looks down at Bakugou, still sitting in his lap. Hizashi lifts his hand, hesitates a second, then lets his hand rest on Bakugou's head. If they had tried to do that when the boys were first brought home, Bakugou would have growled and moved away from the hand. This time, Bakugou leaned into the touch, and when Hizashi started to pet him, he literally started wagging his tail. Once again he and Hizashi were in shock and awe at seeing just how much the wolf had come to trust them, or at least, come to trust Hizashi. Midori seemed to have decided that he was done being ignored and thumped his paws on the ground in a classic show of bunny anger. However, right as Hizashi was about to lean down and pick up the angry rabbit, Shouta heard a voice in his head, and judging by the way Hizashi froze, he did as well. The voice had a pouting edge to it, and Shouta was starting to get an idea of who was talking. SCK at Midori. I ain't moving from this spot. Now Shouta heard a second voice. This one was deeper and sounded smug instead of pouty. Midori rolled his eyes, and yep, Shouta knew who the talking voices were now. Only question left is how. You both can speak? It was only due to Shouta's experience with Hizashi suddenly yelling that he was able to erase his quirk before he deafened their charges. Bakugou and Midori looked at Hizashi, looked at each other, then looked back at Hizashi and, in perfect sync, asked, Shouta doubts that 3 cups of coffee will be enough to shake off this incoming headache. It took over 4 hours for the two to explain what was happening. Apparently, one of their skills was telepathy, which means that now Shouta and Hizashi could understand the little demons. Midori had informed them that he and Bakugou came to the agreement that they both trusted Shouta and his husband and decided to reveal their skills. During those long 4 hours, the boys told him and Hizashi all about their skills and the skill tree. They even showed them the display boards for their quirks, letting him and Hizashi look at all the skills and the descriptions of them. Shouta had also learned about the points, part of the quirk. He and Hizashi shared a look, And if they silently agreed to help them gain those points faster and in larger quantities, well, the two didn't have to know. It had been a few weeks since the reveal and both boys were flourishing. Now when Shouta woke up from sleeping, typically late morning or early afternoon, he could spot the boys in the backyard practicing with some of their less destructive skills. Shouta's heart always warmed at the sight. The knowledge that the kids who grew to fear humans learned to trust him and Hizashi, to the point where they revealed their abilities to them, never failed to make him smile. This morning was shaping up to be a normal day. Shouta woke up after somehow sleeping a full 6 hours and the coffee maker already had his coffee in it. Still warm too, his husband is the best. He chugged the first cup, then after pouring a second, leisurely sipped at it while leaning against the counter. The neon pink, fluffy sweatpants did not match his yellow put your hands up radio shirt, but Shouta honestly gave 0 F about what he looked like to others. The pants were comfy and seeing his husband's face light up whenever he wore the shirt was more than worth whatever SHT people gave him for it. Being careful to not spill his life BLD on his favorite sleepwear, Shouta checked his phone. He first checked his emails to see if he was called in for any raids or new cases that needed his expertise as well as anything else of importance that was connected to his hero work. Finding no new emails, Shouta started thinking back to the previous day and remembered that he got all the grading done for his class of Hellions as well. So that meant he had no work that needed to get done for the rest of the day. If Hizashi didn't have anything planned, maybe they could all spend time just relaxing and having fun. A feeling shot down his spine at that thought. Welp, looks like he just jinxed it. The moment the thought crossed Shouta's mind, he just knew the day was going to be anything but normal. He leaned further into the counter and closed his eyes, trying to pinpoint what the feeling was trying to tell him. It didn't bring goosebumps to his skin like what happens right before something goes horribly wrong on a mission, so Shouta can at least relax knowing that his family was safe. Diving deeper into the feeling, Shouta was shocked to realize he recognized it. The feeling was the same one he had right before the very raid that gave him his 2 sons and the feeling he got the day Shouta went out to lunch with his then-boyfriend only to leave the restaurant with a ring on his finger and the promise of marriage. Once Shouta successfully identified the feeling, he downed the rest of his coffee, put the cup in the dishwasher, and walked back into his bedroom to get dressed. If today was going to bring another big change to Shouta's life, he was going to make sure he was at least in proper clothes and not his pajamas. Hopefully Hizashi would be back from the radio station in time for whatever was about to happen. The sun was shining warmly overhead while Midori pattered around the yard. He loved being outside and everything that experience entailed. The sun was always so warm and the grass tickled his paws just slightly. He also loved all the smells that floated in the air. Midori could smell the flowers in the neighbor's garden, the scent of freshly cut grass, even a hint of the godly scent that was left behind after the rainstorm the previous night. That's become his favorite scent. At the moment he and Bakugou were playing in the backyard, using games to practice some of their less destructive skills. Currently, the game they were playing was hide and seek. Midori was practicing using a 6th sense skill that allows him to sort of sense where a creature is within a certain range. Bakugou, on the other hand, was using a skill from the stealth branch of the skill tree that helps minimize and hide his presence. Basically, they were trying to increase the effectiveness of both skills. They swapped turns seeking with the sense skill and hiding with the stealth skill, while also having fun and enjoying themselves. Midori was getting really good at finding Bakugou, so much so that he was starting to complain. "Found you!" Midori exclaimed, poking his head through the bush that Bakugou was hiding behind. Are you serious? It took me over 10 minutes to find your butt and yet you found me in under 5. How is that fair? Bakugou complained, sulking out from behind the bush. It might be because I like putting my extra points into lots of different types of skills rather than just a few skills on one branch of the tree. Unlike someone I know. Midori teased, side-eyeing his brother in all but "Oh, now you're gonna get it. You get a 3-second head start, then I'm coming to get you," Bakugou declared, crouching down with his front paws in front of him and tail sticking straight up in the air. While he tried to make it seem like he was upset, his wagging tail betrayed his true feelings on the matter. "I got it, but you've got to keep up." Midori squeaked before jeering back and taking his head start for what it was, quickly sprinting away. It was in the middle of their impromptu game of tag, however, that Midori froze. This caused Bakugou to almost run him over before instinct took the reins and he jumped over the frozen rabbit. Bakugou turned back to look at Midori but couldn't see what caused him to freeze. Midori just kept staring off in shock at something, not moving an inch from his spot. "Hey Midori, mind explaining why you just stopped out of nowhere? I could have hurt you for crying out loud." Bakugou demanded harshly but not unkindly, sauntering over to be right in front of him on the grass. Midori could barely hear him though. All his focus was on one single skill prompt flashing before his eyes. "Would you like to acquire the skill transformation? Accept or deny." The skill prompt had popped up while Midori was running from Bakugou, and he would have just waited until after their game to look at it, but then he caught a glimpse of the description. That was what had caused him to freeze so suddenly. Midori reread the description over and over again, wondering if his eyes were playing tricks on him and the words would change to say something else, but they never did. The description of the skill remained the same as when he first read it. This skill allows the user to transform into any creature. However, a solid understanding of the creature's anatomy is required for the transformation to be successful. Bakugou had no clue why his brother just froze. Yeah, sometimes his instincts tell him to freeze up in fear, but Midori always said that ever since their first meeting he never had the instinct to freeze up in fear of him. So Bakugou knows he wasn't the cause of the sudden stop, but he can't figure out what else it could be. He didn't hear any sounds that could have been from a wild predator like a hawk or coyote nearby before Midori froze, so that's out. Nor could he spot anything that might have shocked his brother enough to freeze up after a quick glance around the yard. Maybe. Actually, screw trying to think of what could be wrong. Bakugou's just going to snap his brother out of whatever funk he's in and demand to know what caused him to freeze. With a plan of action decided, Bakugou slowly trotted over to his brother. Even after he was right in front of him, Midori didn't even seem to realize Bakugou was there. Now he was getting worried. "Hey Midori, mind explaining why you just stopped out of nowhere? I could have hurt you for crying out loud." Bakugou questioned sharply, but still worried. When he got no response, Bakugou started to think something might be very wrong. That was when the Green Menace finally decided to speak up. "I just got a new skill notification. It came up while I was running." Midori's voice was dull in the way only shock could cause. "Okay? What's that have to do with why you froze when I was actively running behind you?" Gruffly he asked again. New skills popped up all the time, Bakugou couldn't see why that would cause this big of a reaction. "I froze because otherwise I would have fallen muzzle first into the ground from forgetting to pick up my paws." "Bakugou, the skill says in its description that I would be able to transform into other creatures. You understand what that means, right?" Midori softly stated, finally looking up into his eyes. Their emerald color was obscured by the black of his pupils, all round and wide-eyed. Bakugou's own eyes widened at that. While the description sounded vague, he knew what was being implied. That skill might make it possible for them to turn into humans. They might be able to finally be seen as actual people instead of just incredibly intelligent animals. Frantically, Bakugou pulled up his own display board, hoping he would also find the skill. Midori, apparently snapping out of his state of shock, pulled up his own board and made it visible for Bakugou to see as well. They both had the option to unlock the skill and enough points to do so. "We should unlock it. Together on 3. Midori met eyes with Bakugou, and he could see the excitement within those viridian orbs. He nodded his head. They would unlock the skill together. 1, 2, 3. When Midori called 3, both Bakugou and Midori clicked the unlock skill button as one. The tiny colored sparks, green for Midori and orange for him, sprung from the display board and covered them both, the visual cue that a new skill was being unlocked. Once the lights died down, Bakugou gazed at his new skill, his eyes sparkling just as much as his brother's. The awe of the situation had yet to disappear. They could actually live human lives because of this skill. School, a place to learn about all kinds of subjects, was no longer inaccessible for them. Places like the mall, library, heck, even a normal store, were places they would actually be able to go to now. This skill had opened up an entirely new world for them to explore and experience. "Hey Bakugou." Midori looked over at him, joy and excitement warring for depths in his eyes. I'm gonna try becoming a human. Let me know if I get something wrong. He nodded his head in agreement. Bakugou never wanted to be the reason his brothers went dull, the lights sucked out of them. If letting his brother be the first to try out the skill made him happy, Bakugou would sit back and watch as they entered a new chapter of their lives. Sitting back on his haunches, Bakugou made sure to remind Midori of a key detail he likely forgot in his excitement. Stay on your butt the entire time, Midori. Humans walk on 2 legs, crazy biestas, not 4, so trying to walk will end in you eating a face full of dirt. He snickered to himself. While the image was amusing, he didn't want his brother hurt. Alright, fine, I'll stay on my butt the whole time. Midori playfully pouted, assenting to his point. But if the rapid bouncing was any indication, the excitement was back in full force. I'm activating it. With that shout, Midori's display board lit up with a green glow before he too started glowing. Bakugou watched as the glow seemed to get bigger, no longer a small rabbit-shaped blob and instead becoming a human-shaped blob. Well, almost a human-shaped blob. As the glow started to dissipate, Bakugou moved closer to his now human-shaped brother. The human form had a bush of messy green hair atop the head in the same color as his pelt, slender but sturdy arms with the legs a bit more muscular, most likely because of the power present in them in Midori's rabbit form, and bright emerald green eyes. The same color as before the shift. What was also present after the shift was the rabbit ears pointing towards the sky and the fluff-covered paws taking the place of human feet. Bayu Lu. ID. Human now. Midori gleefully exclaimed. With a human voice. One that he's had 0 practice using before now. Like I couldn't see that for myself, Midori. Bakugou rolled his eyes at him. He can very clearly see that the transformation was a success, or partially a success. Might I point out that humans don't usually have rabbit ears and feet? Would bet you still have a tail as well. Midori didn't respond. Tilting his head up, Bakugou met his brother's eyes. They were wide open and there was barely any color showing with how dilated his pupils were. Then Midori spoke and he instantly understood. Bayu Bibu, I see can't you understand, oh. The panicked shout was loud and the words were jumbled, but he knew what Midori was saying. Bakugou quickly jumped over to him, sitting in his now human lap and shoving his face into Midori's chest. Bakugou continued to murmur telepathic platitudes and push his head into his panicked brother's chest until Midori was laying flat on the ground with him on top of his chest. Slowly, he felt his brother's breathing even out and his heartbeat calm down. Only once he was sure Midori was calmed down did Bakugou start speaking again. And your voice is all scratchy, a soft puff of air, a snort, brushed over Bakugou's head. Seems Midori was feeling better if he was so amused with his comment. Midori snarked back, before pushing Bakugou off his chest. Bakugou snorted. He demanded, quickly snapping back into older brother mode, giving Midori a choice on what their next step would be. Midori agreed to his idea quickly though. Bakugou had felt his brother's new body shake from the slight chill and did not want a popsicle for a sibling. The radio station sent Hizashi home early. They kept on insisting that they would be fine without him for a few days and that he should take a break, but he kept on saying he wanted to be there to help. Apparently they went to Kikyo, Hizashi's manager, and convinced her to put him on break for the next week. Now Hizashi was slightly annoyed, but ultimately grateful. His voice was starting to disappear from all the talks he's been hosting. As he walked along the smooth sidewalk, past the blooming flowers and swaying trees, Hizashi held a steaming cup of tea from the coffee shop near their home. Shouta refused to live in a neighborhood that didn't have one within walking distance. It was his favorite, green tea, with a couple drops of honey to soothe his sore throat. The time was closer to noon now, rather than the early 5 in the morning when he left for the station, so Hizashi was confident his sleepy husband would be getting up. He made sure to set the coffee maker to start brewing 30 minutes before Shouta would normally wake up and set out all the extra ingredients he would need to make his preferred blend after the initial wake-up coffee. Even if Hizashi couldn't be there when he woke up, he was going to make sure Shouta knew he was loved. Strolling up to the faded red front door, Hizashi shuffled in his pocket for his keyring and, after a couple seconds, grabbed the correct one for the door. Slipping the key in, he thought of all the ways he could surprise his husband as the lock twisted open, humming a song quietly under his breath. Stepping inside his home, Hizashi turned to lock the door, then started putting some of his hero gear away. His black combat boots came off and were put on the shoe rack, the leather jacket went on its coat hook, and the directional speaker was put on the hidden charging station in the side table beside the door. Once he finished, Hizashi was gearing up to start making lunch when he turned toward the rest of the house and had to slap a hand over his mouth to prevent himself from screaming. Someone he didn't recognize was sitting in the living room, on their couch. Hizashi could see curly green hair, but he was more focused on the other features. The person had green rabbit ears pointing above their head and fluffy rabbit feet, also green. They were also wearing some of his clothes, a navy blue shirt saying, "Yeesh," in bold yellow letters from one of his merch lines, and his green shorts. What confused Hizashi the most, however, was the fact that Bakugou was laying in their lap and letting himself be petted by the stranger. In his confusion, he must have made some sort of sound because both of them looked over at him. Bakugou's voice was very smug sounding in his head, and that only increased Hizashi's confusion. Then the rabbit-human person started speaking. "Lu, Zashi. I, human now. No mirth smuggler by, now I smar, human." Oh god, that sounded like Midori. Yeah, the words were a bit mushed and sounded wrong, but they held the same tone Hizashi's son used when he was rambling on about something that made him all happy. "Midori?" Hizashi cautiously asked, his eyes never straying from the human-rabbit hybrid. "Things." The Midori nodded his head vigorously. "Okay." The word was drawn out in Hizashi's shock and befuddlement. "Let me just sit down for a sec." He walked forward and sat down on the couch alongside his two sons, putting his head in his hands as he quietly contemplated what brought him to this point in life. Hizashi's sigh was slightly hysterical, but he soon started to himself and sat back up before turning to look at Midori and Bakugou. "Alright, do either of you mind telling me how Midori is now partially human? Doesn't matter who, I just want to understand what's happening." He clapped his hands to help recenter himself before then asking his kids to explain what the F is going on. But new skill while we were chasing each other. I was also given the option to unlock the skill. After realizing that the both of us had the points needed, we unlocked the skill. The skill allows us to transform into other animals. Midori decided he wanted to activate the skill right away. As you can see, it was mostly a success. Once I finished carrying Midori inside and brought him to the couch, I went to get him some clothes from the laundry room. Then we just sat here waiting for either you or Aizawa to find us first. Bakugou very quickly and sufficiently explained. Hizashi would say he didn't see this coming, but thinking back, this did make sense. The two had said that neither of them knew the full limits of their quirk, so the idea that they would gain a skill that allowed them to transform into other animals doesn't seem all that far-fetched. So that's what that feeling was warning me about. Hizashi might have given himself whiplash from how quickly he turned his head towards the hallway. There, standing at the entrance, was Shouta. He was wearing more outside clothes than nightwear, so Shouta must have changed, and with how he only just now realized one of his sons was human-shaped, then he probably just finished changing. "Feelin'?" Midori asked, turning to look at Shouta from his spot on the couch. Hizashi had the thought that if either of them planned on being in a human form often, then speech therapy would be a must. I had a feeling that something was about to change, a good change, but a change nonetheless. After realizing nothing bad was going to happen, I decided to go get changed into something that wasn't my pajamas. Shouta explained. "So, Midori's eyes were practically shining as he looked at Hizashi's husband. "Do either of you plan on being in your human or natural form more often? 'Cause if it's human, we might need to make a few changes." Hizashi spoke up while Midori, and Bakugou as well, looked at Shouta. After asking that question though, both of their attention was on him as Shouta sat down on one of the nearby armchairs. Bakugou was, surprisingly, the one who asked first. Hizashi had already started thinking ahead, so he had no qualms with sharing. "Well, for starters, your room would need to be comfortable for two humans as well as your animal forms, rather than your room only being fit for a wolf and rabbit. We would also need to do a bunch of legal work and set you both up as actual, legal humans instead of just animals with intelligence quirks. I personally think the legal part is one of the more important changes to make. That way, if either of you are interested, we can sign you up for public schooling. After we make sure you're caught up with what kids your age should already know. There were a few other things that would need to be done, but he and Shouta could do those at a later time. "That's a low," Midori quietly commented. "It is, but neither of us would be bothered doing so. We want you both to be happy, and if that means hunching over the table doing legal work for hours on end, we would do so without hesitation," Shouta steadfastly declared. Both Bakugou and Midori had watery eyes and Midori started to sniffle a bit. Hizashi had to stop himself from cooing and bundling them both up in blankets. There was one last thing they should discuss before the day ended. Midori couldn't stop sniffling. His human body apparently had more ways of showing emotion because now he was about to cry from how grateful he was for Hizashi and Shouta and he couldn't stop sniffling. Midori tried using his new front paws to rub away the coming tears, but that just made it harder to stop them. Before he could actually start crying, however, Hizashi spoke up once more. "There is one more thing we need to know before we would be able to start getting you both legalized." Hizashi closed his eyes and took a steadying breath. Then he asked the question that once again changed their lives. "What would you want your legal names to be?" Midori blinked owlishly at Hizashi. He hadn't realized that would need to be changed. Thinking back on it though, he realizes it does make a lot of sense. Most of the humans that they've met have had 2 names, a given name and family name, and considering Midori and Bakugou only had a given name, they would need to rectify that. Bakugou asked for both of them. "Of course. We'll be right here when you're ready," Hizashi replied eagerly. Bakugou nodded before switching his telepathy to be with just Midori instead of the rest of the house. Bakugou asked and pointed out. Midori could see the point he made, and he had ideas for that, but he had a better idea. He started to get a bit self-conscious at the end there. Maybe Bakugou wasn't ready to see them as family yet, or maybe Bakugou liked the idea. Oh good, he was starting to think he wouldn't like it. Now all Midori had to come up with was the rest of his human name. That should be easy, right? Well, not so much. It took a few minutes of brainstorming, but Midori thinks he's finally got a good idea for his new name. He asked his brother. Bakugou replied. Midori called out to him, smiling smugly when he heard Bakugou huff, before turning to look at Shouta and Hizashi. He excitedly proclaimed. "Ba, Katsuki declared." Izuku looked at Shouta and Hizashi and promptly freaked out, waving his hands around in the air. "Why, oh you bo cryin'? Oh Methy, Ron? No. You dash asterisk sniff asterisk, did nothing wrong. I'm just dash asterisk sniff asterisk, super emotional." Hizashi cried out, waving his hands around while also having tears running down his face. "They're dash asterisk sniff asterisk, happy tears. I promise." "And what about Shoei?" Izuku asked, tilting his head to the side. This action accidentally caused Izuku's rabbit ears to flop into his face, making both adults internally coo at the adorableness. Shouta wasn't full-blown tears streaming down the face crying, but his eyes were watering, tears close to falling. Considering the fact neither he nor Katsuki had ever seen Shouta come even close to crying was a bit concerning. "Same as Zashi. You did nothing wrong, these are happy tears. We're both just really happy that you want to use our family name," Shouta explained, ducking his head down like he was trying to hide his face in a non-existent capture weapon. Katsuki informed, making sure the adults were aware of the plan and safety precaution their public names represented. "That's really smart, you two. I didn't even think about the chance of villains attacking either of you to get back at us." Hizashi praised, and Izuku could tell he meant every word. He genuinely thought that it was smart thinking. "We can get that sorted. Most children of pro heroes are either very well known or they use a different name to their parents to avoid attention. It shouldn't be too hard to get the same setup for you two," Shouta commented, already typing on his phone. Izuku was pretty sure he was texting Nizu to see about speeding up the legalization process. He did have a question though, but Izuku wasn't quite sure if now was a good time to ask. Fortunately, Hizashi seemed to notice Izuku's dilemma, probably due to either his ears drooping or his face scrunching up, and took the decision out of his hands. Do you have a question, Izuku? Hizashi asked, looking him in the eyes. Oh, Akidish. Izuku stopped talking, noticing that with the way he was currently speaking he wouldn't be able to properly ask his question. To fix this, he decided to just use telepathy like Katsuki had been telling him to do. Hizashi and Shouta glanced at each other with wide eyes, but before Izuku could spiral into a panic, Shouta answered his question. While we would both be excited and happy to teach you, we work at a high school and mostly teach hero students, and most schools with hero courses are much harder to get into compared to others. As well as the fact neither of you are old enough to go there and it will probably take a while to catch you both up. He explained. Oh, Izuku forgot about that. He and Katsuki haven't learned anything taught in school yet, so it makes sense that they would first need to catch up before even trying to get into a high school, much less one as hard as Shouta thinks it is. Though Izuku has no clue what he meant by a hero student. Katsuki telepathically barked out. Guess that means he was just as confused as Izuku was, even if he was a bit more abrasive when asking. Wait, we've never told you about hero students? Hizashi questioned, looking a bit confused. Izuku replied, tilting his head to the side. He thinks they might have mentioned pro-hero work a few times in passing, but they never ever fully explained what that meant to Izuku or Katsuki. Well, Shouta started to explain. Heroes are people that protect those in need, or that just help others in general with the use of their quirks. Normally this would mean a hero is fighting a villain, someone who uses their quirk to harm others, either to protect the civilians around them in the moment or to prevent the villain from being able to harm others by taking them in before they get the chance. There are also heroes that focus on rescue work, mostly helping rescue and care for people caught in disaster zones. So in general, heroes are people who help those in need with the ability to use their quirks to help them succeed in their goal or mission. Even after Shouta finished talking, Izuku couldn't stop staring with stars in his eyes. That sounded amazing. He wanted to be able to help people, just like how Shouta had rescued them from the facility, but before Izuku had no idea how to go about doing that. Now though, he knows that there is an entire profession dedicated to helping people. Izuku's found what he wants to be. Izuku asked Shouta and Hizashi, looking them in the eyes from his spot on the couch. He wants to become a hero to others. Katsuki but in, declaring his longing to become heroes with Izuku. Are you both sure? It'll be a difficult career and it will take lots of training. Shouta asked Izuku and Katsuki, giving them a heads up. But they've both already made up their minds, him and Katsuki will be heroes together. Izuku exclaimed, his eyes shining and his ears pointing straight up. Katsuki declared, determination shining in his eyes. Both the adult's eyes started to mist over, Hizashi almost about to cry again. However, Shouta didn't let his watery eyes stop him from giving a predatory grin. Guess that means we should get started on training and catching you both up. Try not to fall behind. Even though Izuku felt his body shiver from both the grin and Shouta's ominous words, he couldn't find it in himself to regret this decision. He's gonna become one of the greatest heroes alongside his brother. And if that means facing Shouta and whatever he has in store for them, well, he wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you for joining us on this journey through What If Deku Had a Rabbit Quirk? We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to Galactic Unicorn 43 for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on archiveofourown.org for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends and subscribe to Zenin Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comments section. See you soon in the next video.